Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of the Daily GSPN West Ham podcast crossover today. I'm joined with Michael from the Daily Newcastle podcast. Say hi, mate.
Mate, how's it going? Are you all right?
I'm doing good. I'm doing okay. I'm actually slightly optimistic about West Ham. It's been a pretty tough season. So the fact that I can go into a conversation thinking that maybe we might get something out of it and that we're not going to get absolutely demolished is quite pleasant. So today we're going to be talking about this upcoming game, Newcastle-West Ham at the London Stadium. Yeah. Just to start the podcast, what are your kind of general thoughts about the game? Just open it up.
Yeah, I think for Newcastle, unfortunately, I would love to come into this game, particularly as you beat us 2-0 at St James's Park, with an open mind of, we're going to attack this. But unfortunately, with the Carabao Cup final so close, it kind of feels like a distraction to Newcastle. And we've got this little mentality, unfortunately, where after we've won the semi-final, we do terribly in the lead up to finals. We've won, I think, since 1997. We've played 21 games between a successful semi-final and a final, and we've only won 4 of them. So that'll get West Ham fans' hopes up, I'm sure.
Yeah, a little bit. I think kind of that mixed with our upturn in form, I think kind of makes for a relatively difficult game for you. But
very much so.
It can so easily flip on its head, and I think, you look at us this season, we do have the ability to concede early. And if we concede early, which I think Newcastle does have the quality to punish us quite quickly, it's going to then be a very difficult game, because if you do get the lead, I wouldn't blame you if you just decided to kind of shut up shop a little bit and just play the 1-0 win because of the other things that you want to prioritise. It makes perfect sense.
100%.
Okay, so to get us started, I would like to ask you some questions about Newcastle from a West Ham fan's point of view. So the first one for me, I think, is the fear of a good player getting poached. So this is something that, as a West Ham fan, I'm all too familiar with. A player gets good and they get stolen by another team. And I think for you, it's obviously Isak. I think that is the kind of glaring... From what I would imagine as someone who has seen their good players go, you watch them play, you watch them be so good. There's always that thought in the back of your mind, like, they're playing too well because other people are going to be like, we probably like to take that guy. And when, imagine any of the top teams in Europe just asking for Isak's name, and it's kind of difficult to convince him to stay. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where Alexander Isak has come out and said, whether this is to be believed or not, we all know football players say things in the heat of the moment, but he's come out and said that he's happy to give Newcastle time, but if we don't make it into Europe this season, there's always the chance that he'll leave. The positive on our end is that we're asking for what I believe to be around 150 million. I'm not sure. I don't think there's any teams that are going to be willing to pay that, particularly under PSR restrictions. Manchester City might have been the one that would, but they've got a little striker called Erling Haaland, and they've just signed Marmoush, so I don't think that's an area where they really need anyone. The only thing that sort of has me worried about potentially losing Alexander Isak is the potential of a player swap. Obviously, we've been restricted by PSR. We haven't signed a first-team player for the squad since 2023. Last 3 transfer windows, we've not brought in anyone. We had Lewis Hall, who we'd brought in on a loan, and then we made it permanent in the summer, but that's pretty much the only one. So bringing in players has been difficult for Newcastle, and there was the rumour, nothing more than a rumour at this point, that PSG were willing to offer Marco Asensio, Kolo Muani, and Giancarlo Ramos. Now, 2 strikers seems a bit OTT, but that's the only reason I could see Isak leaving Newcastle in this summer. Next season, I think it's potentially very likely if we don't make Europe in either of the seasons, but it looks very likely that he'll give Newcastle at least up until the end of next season.
Yeah, it's really nice as a fan of a club who is in the kind of the selling market. I think West Ham are like that. I think Newcastle probably are slightly like that, maybe slightly ahead of us when it comes to your status in the league and how people view you as a club. But you just know that you watch a player play well, and you have that thought in your mind that they're going to leave. So when they do kind of come out and make a statement to the club saying that I'm not going to leave straight away, I want to give the club some time, I think that's really nice as a fan. And obviously
100%.
the way I relate is through Declan Rice, because he gave us a lot more time than he needed to. He, was a very good player. I think I said arguably the best DM in the league. I think even with Rodri, even when he was playing for us, to be honest, because the argument I always made was he was playing at the same level in a team that was vastly inferior. So for me, that
100%.
probably makes them slightly better. Like, I don't think Rodri could come into West Ham's team and do what Declan Rice did. So that's a little controversial side thought. But yeah, it's nice when they give you a little bit more time than they probably need to, because I don't think any Newcastle fan would hate Isak for wanting to play Champions League football. That's what he wants repeatedly. That's the sort of player he is. So the fact that he has said, I am willing to stay, I'm willing to give time, give as much as I can, but then there will come a time where they have to leave. And I think you kind of have to accept that and make peace with it and try and just enjoy them and get the most out of them when they're there. And, if you do get European football, what if you got Europa League? Do you think he would stay for Europa League football?
Yeah, I think he'd be more than willing to stay for Europa League because it shows progression in the project. We made Champions League far too early. The benefit of that was we had Sven Botman as a centre-back. We had the best defence in the league when he was there, when he was playing in the back line. He's been injured for the vast majority of the last 2 seasons, and we've ended up conceding more than what we did when we first got relegated, 08-09. So I think, Isak, if we can stay in the Europa League and sort of continue building, I think you'll be happy. And we were supposed to make conference last season, but then Man United somehow won the FA Cup over Man City and we dropped out, unfortunately. So the progression is there, and I think the players can see it. Realistically, we've been quite unlucky with injuries, but no, everyone gets injuries. We don't want to make those excuses. But going into this game and then the cup final, we just found out that 3 of our top players are unavailable for at least the next 3 games. So it's one of those. Isak's back to fitness, and if we can keep him longer than this season, which I think we will, I think he'd be happy with Europa League with the knowledge that Champions League's a possibility.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the next thing I'd like to talk about, maybe one that's maybe slightly more rogue, your goalkeeping situation, because the way that each keeper has been viewed, it seems to change kind of month by month, because I think the major consensus is that Pope is a better keeper than Dubravka. But you look at the performances recently, and to me, I feel like Dubravka has been playing really well. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Yeah,
so Martin Dubravka's kind of been in the bad books with a lot of Newcastle fans. The loan to Manchester United, it's not a hidden secret that he's wanted to leave the club when he was second or third choice, which, to be fair, he's got ambitions. Can't blame him for that. And Nick Pope has been fantastic for Newcastle for a long time. Unfortunately, he's just coming back from an injury and he doesn't look the same player. We've seen it numerous times where goalkeepers have gotten injuries and then not been the same. Shea Given, Joe Hart, a couple that I can think of off the top of my head. And I think Nick Pope's unfortunately going to be one of them. When it comes to on his day, fully fit, sharp, shot stopper, he's one of the best shot stoppers in the league, in my opinion. When it comes to passing the ball out, he's probably one of the worst in the league. While Martin Dubravka, he can pass the ball out. He's been making a lot more high-quality saves than what we've seen from him in the last 2 seasons. So it was a case of, for a Newcastle fan, do you play the goalkeeper that can't kick a ball, or do you play the goalkeeper that can't really save a ball but is quite good with his feet? So we're still in that dilemma, unfortunately. And I think Nick Pope will play as we try and get his sharpness up ahead of the cup final. But to be honest, it's 50-50. Martin Dubravka deserves his place. He has improved this season in comparison to others, but Nick Pope's our best goalkeeper. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. I guess, kind of similar to West Ham, to be honest, because we've always seen Areola as the first choice, and then he got injured and Fabianski played, and Fabianski's been playing really well. So then when it comes to having 2 fit goalkeepers again, the decision about who to play it's always a difficult one, because you find that keepers play better when they play more games in a row. I think chopping and changing keepers isn't the best to get the peak performance out of either of them, if
100%.
that makes sense, So
Yeah, I get you.
making that decision on who to play and kind of sticking them with them is a difficult one when maybe the lesser one is playing really well. And this is us with Fabianski. Fabianski's like 40 and he's been playing really well. So it's like, he's probably someone that you would see as nailed on second choice. But if he's playing well enough to start, then there's quite a good argument to keep him in the team. So I can definitely relate to the goalkeeper problems. But on the flip side, you've got two pretty decent keepers, to be fair. Like, I don't think either of them are terrible. Like pretty good keepers. And the fact that there is a conversation there is only a positive. Okay, we're going to go to our first advert, and when we get back, I'm going to get Michael to ask me some questions.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionique, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionique provide 100% tailor-made supplements, designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionique. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Okay, Michael, I'll let you take the floor and ask me anything you want to know from a West Ham fan.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. So from a Newcastle perspective, I've always expected to see 4 or 5 teams in that 6th to 11th spot, let's say. Newcastle, West Ham, 2 of those. But this season, obviously, it was quite a negative start. I think we were one of the only teams that actually gave Lopetegui 3 points. I'm not sure if I should say you're welcome because it prolonged things. But from the outside looking in, it doesn't look like too much has actually changed under Graham Potter, but the results are so much better. So what would you say has been sort of the main difference sort of the playing style of West Ham, and what's contributed to you getting them results now?
This is always a difficult question. We've been asked it quite a few times, to be honest, or kind of variations of it. But the specific question about what is different or what is better is hard to nail down, because you look at the blueprint of Lopetegui and everything was positive. We made good signings. We'd been in Europe. The kind of season-on-season momentum had been building in a positive direction. We won a European tournament. And Lopetegui seemed to be the opportunity to push forward into that next step, being a European team. And it just didn't work. It didn't fit. There just seemed to be something that was missing when every time we played, we had so many players that didn't quite look like they understood what the actual plan was. They didn't know where to be and who to rely on. And our leaders also looked like they weren't able to lead in the right way because they also didn't know the system. And it's really difficult to find some sort of momentum or some sort of positivity or to galvanize, or even, like Bowen being the most influential player that we have. There were so many games where he just seemed to not really look like he knew what he was doing, which is, for me, a player of that quality, I don't think that that's him just not playing well. I think that it's him just not understanding or not being well enough drilled in the system that we were trying to play. Obviously, it was supposed to be this kind of possession, have the ball, dictate what's happening, and it just didn't happen. Yeah. Now we kind of flip the script with Graham Potter, and he seems to be a lot more relaxed about it. It seems to be more, let's have the ball, let's try and take control of the game, but let's also take risks and let's try and play a little bit more loose instead of this kind of more rigid possession-based football we were trying to play under Lopetegui. I think maybe the jump to that was too sharp, too quickly, and I think because we hadn't had kind of obviously had pre-season, but pre-season is a really difficult way to properly implement a system. It was a big risk. 100%. I think it was a necessary risk, to be honest. I think David Moyes' football is brilliant to getting you to a certain point, and I always make the comparison with Gareth Southgate. That style of football is brilliant to a point, but you then do reach a stage where you have to make a decision on, do we stick with the person who's got us this far, who might have a ceiling, or do we make a risk for someone that might be able to take us a little bit further? Made the risk, didn't pay off. I think it was the right decision still, just the wrong man. These things happen. now we have Graham Potter. Things look really positive. I'm really happy with him. He's using the youth so much more. He's rotating. He's got some players playing brilliantly, like Ollie Scarles. I don't know if you've kind of seen too much about him, but he's been brilliant for us. Young 19-year-old left back. He's probably our starting left back now, to be honest. And it was really funny in the Arsenal game when their young upcoming left back gets sent off, and I was an absolute blinder. I was very pleasantly happy with how that played out, because Arsenal fans just gas up all their players ridiculously high instantly, and
just a little bit,
we know that we've got a really good one, like kind of in the wings, very silently doing a really steady job. So really good. But what the issue was, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I just don't think it was the right fit at the right time, to be honest.
That makes sense, and to be honest, you're completely right about pre-season. When you look to play that possession style of football, you're not going to get the say. It's not really a test run when teams are running at 75, 80%. You want a team realistically opening days or in pre-season to be at you straight away at down your throat, so you get better at that style of play. So it makes a lot of sense. My next question was about Ollie Scarles, and I was going to say there is so many good young left backs at the minute. We've got Lewis Hall, who unfortunately is out for the rest of the season. Arsenal, Lewis Skelly looks good if he can stop getting red cards. And what I was just going to say is, was Ollie one of those that he's been on your books for a little while and you've known that he's going to be sort of coming into the team soon? Or was it just one of those where it just happened and you went, wow, look at this player?
It's a little bit of both. That might be a bit of a cop-out, but I think he's been in the club since he was 11. He's been part of every single age group. He was part of the team that won the FA Youth Cup a couple of years ago, which is a really strong or was a really strong squad for us in the youth leagues. Mm-hmm. And he is part of that really positive crop that we have coming through. I'm personally slightly surprised about how quickly he's been able to establish himself in the first team, because there's always that bedding in process. There's the step up in physicality. There's the step up in kind of overall technique and just ability. When you step into the Premier League, you can't make a mistake, basically, and if you do, you will get punished. And there's very few situations, and I know other leagues are brilliant, but I think the Premier League is so good at highlighting weak points in players' games. I think if they have a weak point, 100%. It will get exposed very quickly. And the thing that Ollie Scarles has shown is that he doesn't really have a weak point. I'm not saying he's the next coming of Ashley Cole, but he is very good at every side of the game. He's played as a left back for us. He's played as a left wing back. It's been really good when he's played a left wing back, because Aaron Cresswell has been alongside him, who is, I think he's 35 now. He's such a veteran Premier League player, knows the game, has been there, he's done it. I feel like he's had a really positive influence on the way that he's played. I'm just really happy with him. He seems really confident. Physically, he's really good. He knows when to make decisions. He's got a bit of bite in him as well. I can't remember what game it was, a couple of games ago, but he came on and he made a slide tackle straight away, and he loved it. And I was like, that is exactly the sort of mentality you want for a young player coming into the team. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we want for any player. And you can tell that he's really happy to be there, and he's worked really hard and he deserves it. So yeah, I'm really happy, and I want to see him start every game, to be honest, because I think he's good enough. Yeah,
100%. I mean, debut, keep a clean sheet against Arsenal. It's not bad, is it?
Yeah, he can get much better than that.
Exactly. Now, one of my other questions I'm sure you are tired of talking about, and it is on the topic of Lucas Paquetar. Now, as a Newcastle fan with Sandro Tonali, I can sympathise, maybe better than others, but is it one of those now where you're kind of just waiting for it to be over and you just sort of want it to be sorted, or is it elongating it as long as possible so you can see this fantastic Brazilian player play for the club even more?
I think, to be honest, the talk about it has kind of died down, because we know that we're kind of waiting for this is the calm before the storm, isn't it? It's very much, we know that it's coming, but for now, let's try not to talk about it. Let's just brush it under the carpet and try and get as much out of him as possible. Because like you say, he's brilliant, and I really don't think there's many players like him in the league. He's so unique in the way that he plays. He's got such a strange mix of technical ability and physicality. When we had all of our strikers injured, he played as like a a false nine kind of attacking. I don't even know what you'd call it, to be honest. There's probably some Spanish term that perfectly describes it, but I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know. Yeah, he was just brilliant. His hold-up play was so good for someone who's, he's not massively tall. I think he's like 6 foot or 6'1". Yeah, his hold-up play was brilliant. The way that he links other players in on play is amazing. When he drops deep, he picks up the ball. He's so good at driving, and his ability to get out of pressure as well in like really tight little spaces. It's so Brazilian the way that he does it. It's amazing. And also defending, he's really rugged. He loves the slide tackle. He's got a bit of bite about him. So yeah, I just love him. So the prospect of losing him to suspension or a ban or something like that is very unsettling. But there's not really a lot we can do, to be honest. I don't think there's too much point wasting our time being stressed or being upset about it. Let's just get the most out of him while we have him, and we'll have to deal with whatever comes when it comes.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think you're absolutely right. We had sort of a similar thing with Tonali, and we're glad to have him back. Obviously, the rumours are that it'll be a lifetime ban, which in my opinion seems very, very harsh. But, I'm not a governing body, so it's not really my realm. But the last sort of question I wanted to have is sort of a bit more of a cheery one from a West Ham perspective. Of in previous years we've seen, even under David Moyes, West Ham weren't the best defensive team. But what we're seeing now is a side that's a little bit, it's a lot more resolute, should I say, and you're conceding a lot less because of that. Is that because of signings that you brought in the summer that are, like a Max Kilman or a Todibo? I know Todibo was there a bit earlier, but than Kilman. But is it because of those signings, or is it something that Graham Potter's coming in and everyone's just a lot more confident and able to do their jobs? Obviously, you mentioned earlier under Lopetegui, seemed like maybe roles were a little bit confusing at times.
I think it's a mixture of both. The signings were good, did take a little bit of time to kind of settle in. So you understand the team not performing at its highest early in the season. Like, we had quite a large squad 100%. Overhaul. We arguably had the best window of the summer, and the fact that the team didn't gel instantly isn't really a surprise. So maybe can't blame it completely on Lopetegui, but then, the further it went under him, it didn't start to change. So that's when it's like, well, at some point you have to stop blaming the players not settling in, and you have to kind of look at why the mistakes are being made again and again. Like, we conceded early in games so many times. We'd concede the first goal really early, and then we'd be fighting to try and get something out of the game, and maybe eventually we'd scrape a draw, or we'd lose, but we pile a load of pressure on right at the end, which just isn't really good enough. We shouldn't be putting ourselves at such a disadvantage so early in the game. So yeah, that was kind of the theme of Lopetegui, just like relatively poor defence and not having too much kind of attacking threat. Under Potter, the defence does look a lot better, and I think Max Kilman has been a brilliant signing. I think he is so calm under pressure, and he's such a good voice at the back. He was Wolves captain. I could quite easily see him becoming West Ham captain at some point. Obviously, Jared Bowen is the Lord and Saviour, so I wouldn't want to take it off of him. But, if for any reason Bowen isn't involved, I think he's quite a good candidate to take that role. Also, Todibo has been really solid in the past few games. He got injured and has been swapping with Mavropanos, who I think has looked good at times. I think Mavropanos sometimes has a mistake in him, but physically he's really good. He's strong, he's fast. We're starting to see a settled team, which is really nice. And I think that's also contributing to the fact that our defence is getting better. I also think, like kind of the discussion we had before about the goalkeepers, we've got 2 really good goalkeepers, which I think really helps. Fabianski has saved us a lot, especially when Ariel has been injured. He's had some absolutely amazing performances. So I think Potter has brought the best out of players who are also now starting to get fully settled. So I think kind of both.
To be fair, that was the last of my questions, so it might be time for another advert. I don't know.
It is indeed. Yeah, we'll go to this final advert, and when we get back, I want to do some predictions about the game and talk about who we think the biggest threats are on each team.
Good stuff.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we've spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Okay, so I would like us to say 2 players from the other team that we think will play and that we think is a threat. One obvious one and one not so obvious one. Would you like to go first? Would you like me to go first? I don't mind either way.
I'm happy to go first. I think, to be honest, I think the very obvious is Jarrod Bowen, so I'm not going to speak about him. I'm actually going to speak about a player that I've admired so much when he was at Ajax, and that's Mohamed Kudus. When it comes to, under Lopetegui, you probably won't mind me saying he looked like your main threat. Every time on the ball, every time he got on the ball, he was just so direct, so pacey, so good at dribbling, and obviously he can shoot from pretty far out as well. I'm not sure if it was his debut against us in the 2-2, or it was definitely his first goal for West Ham.
Yeah, it was one of
I
those.
remember sitting there and thinking, why haven't we made a bid for him? Because you knew about him beforehand. It's not exactly like he was a secret. I mean, the scouting team have gone, yeah, he looks good. Just pick him up. Every other scouting team's gone, hang on, we need to find out how good he is at dribbling. Can he tackle? And all that. And it's a case. I mean, I'm sure West Ham did their dividends, and it wasn't just he looks good. But you just got it done so quickly, and it's so frustrating to a team who, at the minute, isn't looking great in the winger department. Barnes hasn't performed. Jacob Murphy's having the season of his life, but we all know it's not going to continue. So it was very frustrating. And for me, he's a fantastic player. But the second is the player that scored the opener in the 2-0 at St. James's. That's Thomas Souček. I don't know what it is, because whenever I see him, and to be honest, it hasn't been often, not against Newcastle, doesn't seem to play that well. But when I see him against Newcastle, he seems to be a bit of a colossus. He's really good in the air, and it's one of those that I think if you're going to score the opening goal, set pieces are going to be something we really are going to struggle with. Now, that was the only set piece goal we conceded for a long time. And I'm quite fearful that it'll happen again. So alongside the obvious Jarrod Bowen, those 2 are my main threats.
Yeah, I think they're very good points, to be honest. I don't think you really need to say much about Jarrod Bowen. He's unbelievably good.
Yeah, I think everyone knows.
The Kudus conversation is brilliant as well, because he's someone that really hasn't got as many goals and assists this season as he should have done, to be honest. You look at the way he plays, like you say, so direct, and he always has his numbers of take-ons and successful dribbles are always, he usually has about incredible. 30 or 40 more than the next person at the end of the season, which is mind-blowing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm terrified that he's going to leave, because he should definitely be playing Champions League football. The way that he is
I agree.
Any player in the Premier League, he's able to make them look so silly and sit them down and turn on a dime and just absolutely roast them. Like in the Arsenal game, the fact that Skelly got sent off was because he's been absolutely dispossessed. Kudus has been more hungry. He's dispossessed him, and there's only really one thing you can do after Kudus gets past you, because he's probably quicker than you. He's very strong. He's got really 100%. Long arms as well. I don't know if you've noticed this. His arms are very long and they're very muscular, so he dribbles past you and shoves you out of the way at the same time, which is crazy and it's brilliant, and I love it.
Bit like a non-baby oiled Adama Traore.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that comparison is really good, actually. It's not one I've thought about before, but yeah, I just love him. He's so good, and Thomas Souček is just an absolute warrior, I think is how I'd describe him. He's a leader, but not verbally. It's by his actions. He's always running. He's always putting in challenges. The amount of headers that he wins is ridiculous. I very rarely see him lose a header, to be honest. And the goal threat, the kind of strange goal threat, he always just seems to be in a position to score a goal. It doesn't really ever seem like he's made a run or he's, lost his defender. He just kind of ends up there. But I'm not complaining, because I think that is a skill in itself, like knowing where to be. So
100%. Positioning,
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so when it comes to Newcastle, obviously the obvious one is Isak. He's unbelievably good. I am going to say him because I'm terrified of him, to be honest. He's arguably the best striker in the league. I know the him and Haaland debate is interesting. I'm not really sure where I stand on it, to be honest. It kind of depends what the criteria is. If you're saying just goals, you kind of have to go on who scored more goals. But if you're going on overall play and influence on a team and ability to kind of push you over the line, you'd say that Isak definitely makes Newcastle better than Haaland makes City. So I'd agree. I'm just terrified. I think you have to be so on your A game when you're defending him, because he seems to be able to kind of beat you in any way possible. He can smash it in the top bins. He can place it really nicely. He's got finesse sometimes. He's got power sometimes. So, yeah, absolutely terrified of him. The next one, who's maybe kind of an underrated one, who I don't know will actually play this game. He might do. You probably let me know. Is Lewis Miley. I think he goes under the radar massively because his name has been thrown about quite a lot over kind of probably last season, maybe a little bit before. I'm not sure when he first broke into the first team, but the chatter about him has kind of died down, and he's gone about having very productive games and having a really solid season, in my opinion. I don't know what your opinion on that is, but I just really like him. I think he looks like he's becoming a really good little player, and I think he will emerge as one of Newcastle's better players in the coming seasons. So yeah, I think for me, they're my two. I think Lewis Miley is just one that you wouldn't normally think of as being a threat, but when Newcastle are playing games in different competitions, it's players like that then get the opportunity to prove themselves, and I feel like he could be someone that has a really positive influence on this game.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. It's easy to look at a midfield three of Bruno, Tonali and Miley and look at Miley as the weak link, but when we really realised that Miley was a good player was we played him, I believe it was PSG in the Champions League, and he didn't look out of place. And unfortunately, he's had an injury for a large portion of the season. He's come back in 2025, and he's really bulked up. One of the things that we noticed last season was that he's a little bit too lightweight for central midfield for those big games. He's come back, he's bulked up, and he still looks as good on the ball. He was never a quick player, but it's one of those, every time he gets on the ball, he looks exciting. And to be honest, we looked terrible against Manchester City until Miley came on, albeit it was too late. But we look a lot better with a 19-year-old in midfield than we have with Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali, and I believe who would it have been? It would have been Joe Linton, I believe, at the time. So, that on paper, one of the best midfield three, but somehow it's been made better with Lewis Miley, and I'm not going to go overboard. He's 19, still got a lot to learn, but the potential is there for him to be certainly one of our best centre mids of all time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just love seeing youth academy players come through, to be honest.
100%.
It's a different feeling when it's one of your own youth academy prospects. I don't really know how to explain it, really. It's just like you're just so happy for them and you want them to do well. And when they do well, it is brilliant. Okay, so to end the podcast, I would like you to give me your prediction.
Yeah. I want to say that I think, I am going to say, I think Newcastle are going to come out winners. We tend to do better against you at the London Stadium than we do at St James's Park, which is thankful because we couldn't have been much worse than we were at St James's Park. But you nullified us really well. And I think the fact that under Potter, you're less likely to sit back and sort of absorb the pressure like you did that day. I think you'll give us a good game. It'll be 50-50 end to end. But I do think the quality of Alexander Isak, maybe the return of Joe Linton will steer us through. It's going to be a much harder game than what I think some people realise. But I think we'll edge it 2-1. But I really wouldn't be surprised if it ended as a draw.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think the London Stadium is such a strange place for our kind of football games. I know that might sound slightly vague, but
just
to
sort of cut you through there. We've had very interesting talks on our pod about stadiums. How do you feel about the London Stadium, just quickly? Because I think as a West Ham fan, going from Upton Park to the London Stadium, it must have had so much potential. But since you've got there, it must be sort of we kind of miss that, because we're looking likely to move from St James's Park, which is the reason I ask, and I feel like we're going to be in a similar scenario. So, just quickly, how has it sort of felt moving, if you don't mind me asking?
I think I would equate it to having a step parent that you're not that fond of, but they aren't going anywhere, so you just kind of have to deal with it and accept it and find the good in it and create a relationship that isn't necessarily there at the beginning, if that makes sense. I know that's a very strange analogy, but we
get it.
are there now. That's it. We just have to accept it. I think chat about whether it was the right thing to do and we shouldn't be there, blah blah blah. Like, what are we supposed to do now? We're supposed to find another stadium from somewhere, and it just isn't going to happen. The actual
it doesn't grow
stadium
on trees.
itself, I think, especially since the increasing amount of seats. So I went relatively soon after it opened, and it was pretty bad, to be honest. Like the big running track meant the fans were really far away from the pitch. You actually go to a game now, and it's not really that far away from a pitch. Like there are stadiums all over the world that play with a big running track around the pitch, and the atmosphere can still be good.
Yeah,
the
100%.
atmosphere at the London Stadium is good. Like, it's not terrible. People say it's like completely silent, which just isn't true. It's not necessarily making this like bouncy noise that you get from a really tight knit stadium, but we consistently get 36,500 fans, which is the most in London. We have the largest fan base in London, I think. I don't know if that's completely accurate, but we consistently fill the London Stadium, and that's not an easy thing to do. So you look at it in the grand scheme of things, like if we are pushing for European football, the fact that we've got like over 60,000 fans for every game, it's brilliant. And when in the big games, the atmosphere is there. The place does absolutely rock. I think, especially so I went to the Sevilla game in the Europa League a couple of years ago when we beat them. The place was absolutely bouncing. The noise was incredible.
Stuff.
The whole stadium singing Bubbles was amazing. It's just, it takes a lot to make it that sort of atmosphere. So is it the best place possible? No. But is it as terrible as people make out to be? No, of course it's not. People just like to complain. They don't like change. Obviously, Upton Park was a beautiful place, and it's got a magical place in every West Ham fan's memory. But you look at the actual location, there was no real room for expansion. The infrastructure around the stadium wasn't great. The public transport there was really difficult. Like, if you're talking actual logistical terms, it was definitely the right move. It's just, is there anything that could have been done better early on? I think is probably more the question. So it's a difficult one, but I'm not massively unhappy with it, to be honest.
That makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons, I think, between the two clubs. Most importantly, two fantastic fan bases, and it's one of those where I've seen and heard from West Ham fans, and it's one of those where I say, we kind of wish we'd stayed, but we're in this situation now, so let's just get on with it. And it will probably be the same, which is why just to draw the comparison for our listeners. But apologies for talking over you and asking that question. But what about you? What do you think the game's going to be like?
I'm very scared. I'm scared of Isak. I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if I've said it already, but
a little bit. But I like it. Keep it going.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd be stupid not to. You have to be honest about the team you're facing in it, and he's in brilliant form this season. So I think he scores. I'm going to say 2-1 to West Ham. I think it's obviously optimistic. If I'm being real, it's going to be a really tough game. I think 100%. Newcastle have a lot of quality. The thing that goes in our favour is the competitions, is the fact that you're going to be thinking about other things. There's no other thing that all of those West Ham players think about. They're thinking about right there, right now. In the back of the Newcastle players' minds, if they want to play in the other competitions that you have, they're going to be thinking, maybe I don't make that challenge. Maybe I don't stretch that a little bit further. Maybe I don't empty the tank because there's an opportunity to actually win something. So I think that could be something that plays in our favour massively. I'm going to say 2-1. I think we concede early. I think Isak scores in the first half. We play very poor, very slow. That happens quite a lot at home. In the second half, I think we make a few changes. I think Evan Ferguson comes on, and I think that we then end up scoring 2 goals in the second half. I'm going to say Jarrod Bowen, Evan Ferguson, 2-1 to West Ham. Happy days. Not for you. Apologies. But Isak scores,
unfortunate, but it's,
isn't it?
Yeah. That's fine. Evan Ferguson, his best ever performance has come against us as well. Got a hat-trick against us for Brighton, and I don't think he scored for them for the rest of the season. And it was in game 3 or something like that. Yeah. So, we had that exact back line. Has struggled with them before, but either way, I think it's going to be a great game, and it's obviously going to be very tight. So good for the neutral, maybe not good for our fingernails.
Yeah, do you think Isak will score? I just want to kind of put that out there because think it's slightly obvious that I probably do.
There's not a game that goes by where I don't think he'll score. He is, seriously, if we didn't have Alexander Isak, we would be where you are right now, 15th. I think you are on the table. We'd be down there because it's so tight. There's 11 points between the two clubs. Alexander Isak's done more than win us 11 points this season. So without him, we'd be in. I'm not saying we'd be in trouble, but yeah, we'd be in a much different position. We wouldn't be pushing for Champions League. So yeah, I always expect Alexander Isak to score. He's arguably the best striker we've had since Alan Shearer. Maybe as a complete player, a little bit better, but Shearer was obviously pretty decent at scoring goals.
Yeah, he was all right, wasn't he? He wasn't too bad.
He was okay.
Maybe not quite Miguel Antonio, but he was okay on his day, wasn't he?
Oh, Miguel Antonio against Newcastle is very different to Miguel Antonio against anyone else, so I'll agree with that. He's a machine against us.
Yeah, he's a machine against a lot of teams. Okay, well, I think that's going to end today's podcast. Thank you very much for watching this episode of the Daily GSPN podcast. Say goodbye, mate.
Thanks, West Ham fans, for having me in Newcastle. I hope we see a win.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate it 5 stars and check out all of our social medias that are linked in the description. Also, go and check out the Daily GSPN Newcastle podcast. Do great stuff over there, so go check it out. Check out all the other podcasts under the GSPN Podcast Network banner. We've got the Women's Football Podcast, the Daily Wrap-Up Podcast in all sorts of languages, got the Fantasy Football Podcast, and obviously all of the other Premier League teams' podcasts. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you again soon. Goodbye.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.